So, Justin, we were talking about AI, what we've just learned from polling, which is both good and bad. People are at least really starting to understand this, which is good. If they don't understand this, or they only understand it like we understood social media when we got on. Have you seen the Twitters? I'm on Facebook. If we approach AI like that, we're doomed. Because by the time you figure it out, everything will be different. Yeah. And so it looks like people are starting to pay attention to it before we get there.
And they want rights and protections embedded in it.
That's great.
That's what they want.
Now, talk to me about the EU, because the EU has decided we're not playing this game. We're not. We don't have to be the first. Well, first of all, you wouldn't be, but we don't have to be the first. We're just going to be the ones that set all of the rules.
Yeah. The expansion of power in the European Union during the Biden administration into today has been absolutely unbelievable. And this is just another example of it. We've talked about the EU ESG law before, where they're trying to impose ESG on all of America and the whole world. Well, this is similar to that. They passed a law called the AI Act in 2024. So last year they passed it. Some of the law has already gone into effect earlier this year. More of it goes into effect in August. Penalties and things like that for non-compliance go into effect over the next couple of years.
Part of the stuff where you can't say anything, the society or the governments disagree with, or you go to jail, or is this basically all these laws for the high-tech companies?
These are for big tech companies, okay? So that's what the purpose of this is. The idea behind these is to force AI developers, no matter where they are in the world. They could be in America, they could be in Canada, or they could be in the EU or someplace else.
Just not China, because they don't care.
Well, they don't, they let them slide.
Right.
To adopt all of these EU sort of like ESG rules and to embed them into their AI systems.
No way.
And and their way of determining whether this might apply to you is not whether you have an EU or not whether you have an AI system offered in the EU. It's not even whether someone in the EU uses your AI system from the EU. It's based on the use of an output from an AI system. So in other words, if you have ChatGPT produce a offensive transphobic meme, and that is used by somebody in the EU, because you send it to somebody in the EU and then some influencer in the EU spreads it all over the place, that's enough to bring your AI system under their law, under the AI Act.
Oh my gosh.
Okay? Now, it's a super complicated, absurdly ridiculous law. Okay?
I got to tell you, if this doesn't fall, you know what? Because what I would do if that were the case and we had a president here that was going to allow those punishments to stand, I'd find a way to embed some sort of code that would not allow it to be spread in the EU. I don't even know if that's possible, but
right.
You would just say, cut them off. I don't want anything in the EU.
Well, what's crazy about this is even if you didn't offer your service in the EU, just the output alone, it's like you have to force big tech companies not to operate in the EU. And why would they do that? Because they can make money in the EU. That's the genius of what the EU... So what's amazing about this is... before we get into that, the requirements. What are the things that you have to do if you're a covered company under this? There's all these obligations that you have to do. You have to conduct detailed risk assessments. You have to build in human oversight, maintain logs, testing protocols, submit extensive documentation for EU regulators. But the worst of it all is that you have to build a risk mitigation system to avoid actions considered harmful by the EU into your AI systems, okay? Now, what is a risk mitigation system exactly? How do they define risk under this law? Well, risk is so broadly defined that almost anything could be considered. It's essentially whatever the EU regulators want to ask you to stop doing, they can ask you to stop doing it, or else you pay these massive fines. How big are the fines? You might wonder. Well, it depends on the violation, but for most of the violations that I think we would be concerned about, it would be 3% of total worldwide revenue for that company.
Not profit.
Nope.
Revenue.
So
if you run a regular company, what is it? I mean, it's usually a good return is what, 6 to 8% on your dollar. They could take.
We're talking billions of dollars
We're
per violation
talking about
for big companies.
Gigantic proportions
like Apple.
of. If you're taking straight revenue, your profit could be gone.
Yes, exactly. So it forces compliance.
Gosh.
So it forces compliance. It's very similar to the EU ESG law that we had talked about before, except it's focused on AI. So they're requiring these companies to adhere to these absurd rules. They're going to do it because they're going to make money off of it. So I want to give you some specific examples from the law. So in the law, there's this section where they basically lay out their intent. And in their intent, which is pages and pages and pages long,
of course it is,
they talk about risks. Now, some of the risks that they're concerned about, and they're trying to stop with this law, so this is what's in their mind, this is how courts are going to interpret it in the EU, so this is why this is important. It says when they're talking about general purpose AI models, they're talking about the systemic risk that a big one might cause. So we're talking about like ChatGPT or something like that, okay? It says that could pose systemic risks, which include, but are not limited to, any actual or reasonably foreseeable negative effects in relation to major accidents, disruptions of critical sectors, and serious consequences to public health and safety, any actual or reasonably foreseeable negative effects on democratic processes, public and economic security, the dissemination of illegal, false, or discriminatory content. Then there's a whole bunch of other things I'm going to skip down. Risks from models making copies of themselves or self-replicating, in which models can give rise to harmful bias and discrimination, with risks to individuals, communities, or societies, the facilitation of disinformation or harming privacy, with threats to democratic values and human rights, a risk that a particular event could lead to a chain reaction with considerable negative effects that could affect up to an entire city, an entire domain activity, or an entire community.
What?
Now, this is the law. This is what they put into the law. This is what they are. So
I don't even know what that last one means.
It's anything, Glenn. Like the whole thing could be summarized as whatever we want. Okay, so I asked ChatGPT, are you is this something that you're concerned with? It's already supposed to go into effect. Are you doing anything? And it's very clearly, ChatGPT says, yes, we've already been changing. OpenAI already has been changing its algorithms to conform to this and other laws like it. It's already happening. So we've been sitting here talking about why is AI doing all this crazy woke stuff, and why is it only promoting certain views of various issues or things like that? Well, because it's being forced to do that, in part at least because of the European Union. So while China and America are in a race to, the AI race to see who's going to develop it first, Europe's just like, we don't really care who develops it first as long as you just do whatever we tell you.
Okay, so that's a really cute idea, but may I take it to the last big possible destructive force, and that's the Manhattan Project. Europe could be sitting there and going, well, Russia might develop their own nuclear weapons, and America, but we're going to make the rules. Maybe if Russia and America were like, okay, you can make the rule. I mean, if China and the United States are like, I don't really care, we're not doing it.
Agreed. And so one of the things in here that's good, so we're going to talk about some of the good stuff that's in it, is there are direct prohibitions on the use of AI. So it's banned, not a penalty, like you can't do it. That deals with AI that exploits human vulnerabilities like age or disability, certain social scoring.
What does that even mean, though?
Of course. And that's always the problem with these things. There's stuff in there about the use of AI for subliminal mind-altering apps and things like that. They don't want that happening.
Sure they don't.
Right. Like, I mean, there's like stuff in there that you look at and you're like, well, yeah, I mean, I don't want to be subliminally,
but it's all ephemeral. How are you going to prove that? It's happening now.
It's whatever they want.
Oh,
that's
my gosh.
that's the power play.
Show me the person, I'll show you the crime.
Yes, and so what you need. By the way, there is a Minority Report type thing in here that says you can't use this to predict crime and then arrest people for it, but that's a whole other thing. But
why not? You just use the cameras.
We can see it in real time. We don't need to predict it.
Right.
But I think that the main part of all of this is, why would America allow the EU to dictate how it's designing its AI programs.
Easy. If you have the progressive counterpart to the EU, then you can't get things through your House and Senate. Okay, we couldn't pass any of that crap. So let them do it, and then we'll just go. Well, we are one with the EU, and we're just going to follow their rules, and we'll just do that. So it allows you to destroy all of American rights just by blaming it on them. I think that's why.
That's 100% why. This was the whole Biden. I think at some point this became the actual strategy for whoever was running the Biden administration. That was the strategy. Like, we are not getting anything done. It's over for us. We're just going to let Europe do whatever it wants, and we'll just have to comply with it, and we'll allow them to impose ESG on us and all these other things.
Because we can't get it through. I know because the guy who was running the administration was Mike. So
was it really?
Yeah, it was Mike.
Wow.
Yeah.
Was he an okay guy or?
I don't know. I just know his name was Mike. At least he ran it on Mondays. I don't know who ran it the rest of the week.